Imagine the intense, fiery sensation of biting into a surprisingly hostile chili pepper. You know that specific burn, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Your eyes are watering, your heart rate spikes, your mouth feels like it's genuinely on fire.
And you're desperately scanning the room for a glass of milk.
Yes, exactly.
Mm.
Now take that exact same burning chemical compound and imagine a surgeon intentionally putting it directly into your exposed tissue right after a knee operation.
It sounds like some kind of medieval torture method.
It really does.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to look at why that is actually a cutting-edge medical trial.
It's a brilliant paradox, honestly, and it perfectly captures the dual nature of the plant family we're analyzing today. We are looking at an organism that wields this incredible chemical power, yet, as we'll see a bit later, is shockingly vulnerable to the invisible chemicals lurking in our own backyards.
Right. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled to have you with us. Today we're exploring a wild collection of botanical history, modern medical science, and a rather charming trial-and-error gardening experiment.
It's a really fun mix of sources today.
It is, and our mission for you is to untangle the global history of peppers, explore how their defensive mechanisms are being co-opted for pain relief, and follow a couple of amateur gardeners who accidentally highlight a pervasive hidden danger in everyday compost.
Yeah, that compost part is going to be super relevant for anyone who likes to grow their own food.
For sure. Okay, let's unpack this. We should probably start with the great pepper mix-up, because when we throw around the word pepper, we are wading into a massive ocean of linguistic and botanical confusion.
What's fascinating here is that to understand this historical mix-up, we have to completely separate the black pepper you grind over a steak from the chilies that bring the heat to a salsa.
Right, they aren't just different species, are they?
No, not at all. They are entirely different biological families. True black pepper comes from a plant called Piper nigrum. It's a climbing vine, and it's native to the incredibly humid tropical rainforests of southwest India.
And the history of that specific climbing vine basically shaped the global economy. I mean, long before global shipping conglomerates, merchants were organizing these massive camel caravans to transport this stuff across the earth.
Yeah, it was a grueling, highly dangerous journey spanning thousands of miles of hostile terrain.
They literally referred to it as black gold.
Right.
And the underlying economic driver for that massive effort wasn't about, elevated Michelin star gastronomy.
Not even close.
It was purely functional. It was to mask the terrible taste of meat that was well on its way to rotting.
Which is just a stark reminder of the realities of the human diet before the advent of refrigeration. People were paying astronomical sums, essentially the equivalent of precious metals, just to make their protein palatable enough to swallow without gagging.
It's so gross to think about, but it makes total sense.
And what's interesting is that the actual production process of that Piper nigrum hasn't fundamentally changed over the centuries. Yeah. Harvesters take the green, completely unripe berries of the vine, they scald them in hot water to clean them and break down the cell walls, and then they just leave them to dry in the blistering sun.
So that sun-drying process is what shrinks the berry down and gives it that classic dark, wrinkled surface we recognize in our pepper grinders today.
Exactly. Though the geography of the trade has shifted dramatically since the days of those camel caravans.
I would imagine so.
Oh, absolutely. The global supply chain has totally decentralized. While India is still a major player, cultivation has spread to tropical regions worldwide. Vietnam has actually taken the crown as the world's largest producer of black pepper now.
Wow, Vietnam.
Yeah, followed closely by India, Brazil, and Indonesia.
So that vine is one side of the coin. But then we have to pivot to the entirely different plant family that gives us the actual fiery heat, the Capsicum genus.
Right.
Which belongs to the nightshade family.
Yes, and the nightshade family, or Solanaceae, is vast. It's biochemically complex. The Capsicum genus specifically is where we get everything from cayenne to habaneros, as well as the completely mild bell peppers.
Right, which brings up another funny linguistic quirk.
Oh, in Denmark.
Yeah, in Denmark, for instance, if someone refers to a green pepper, they are talking about a mild bell pepper that basically tastes like a fresh pea.
Right, with absolutely zero heat.
Just a crunchy water vegetable, basically. But the word chili itself originates from the Nahuatl language of southern Mexico, which gives you a major clue about the intense sun-drenched climate these plants evolved in.
Exactly. Which brings us to the burn.
Yes, the burn. Some people are totally obsessed with chasing that fiery sensation, especially to cut through starchy, heavy meals. But there is a massive biological variance in how people experience that heat, isn't there?
Huge variance, and that comes down to a specific chemical called capsaicin and how our bodies process it.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. So, capsaicin binds to TRPV1 receptors in our mouths and skin. These receptors are essentially your body's heat-detecting alarms. Their primary job is to warn you if you are, say, drinking boiling water or touching a hot stove.
So they keep us from actually burning ourselves.
Right, but capsaicin tricks those receptors into firing, sending a panic signal to your brain that you are physically burning, even when there's no actual temperature change.
But if you eat enough of it, you can essentially break the alarm system, right?
Essentially, yes. If you are constantly flooding those receptors with capsaicin by eating incredibly spicy foods, you deplete a specific neuropeptide called substance P.
Substance P.
Yeah. Without enough substance P, the nerve simply cannot send the "I'm on fire" memo to the brain anymore. You exhaust the local pain signaling mechanism, meaning you barely notice the heat that would leave someone else in agony.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because medical researchers looked at that biological mechanism and saw a massive opportunity.
They really did.
There was this fascinating trial out of Denmark's largest hospital where doctors took capsaicin and experimented with applying it directly into the surgical wound of a patient immediately after a knee operation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the rationale is actually brilliant. We know that major surgeries require significant pain management.
Right.
Traditionally, that means administering heavy systemic painkillers like opioids, but those affect the entire body. They leave patients groggy, nauseous, and dealing with a whole host of side effects that can actually slow down their physical rehabilitation.
So the thought process was, instead of drugging the whole body to ignore the knee, what if we just temporarily burn out the specific pain sensors in the knee itself?
Precisely. By applying capsaicin locally to the surgical site, the goal is to trigger that localized depletion of substance P. They exhaust the pain receptors right where the trauma occurred.
That is so smart.
It is. It significantly reduces the patient's reliance on systemic painkillers during those crucial first few weeks of rehab. It is a highly targeted neurological block using a compound evolved by a plant in Mexico.
It is brilliant, though it does come with a highly practical warning from the sources. Reading through the methodology of handling clinical-grade capsaicin is your ultimate public service announcement to always wash your hands thoroughly after you handle chili fruit in the kitchen.
Oh, or after digging around in the garden dirt, for that matter.
Yes.
Because you absolutely do not want capsaicin ending up near your eyes or, frankly, any other sensitive areas. The clinical grade stuff requires serious protective gear, but even a standard jalapeno can ruin your afternoon if you rub your eye.
I think we have all made that mistake exactly once.
Just once. You learn pretty quick.
You really do. But hey, speaking of digging in garden dirt, this is the perfect moment to transition to the narrative core of what we're analyzing today. We've seen how powerful the chili plant is in a clinical setting, but growing this temperamental, heat-loving plant from scratch is a whole different kind of science experiment.
It really is.
And that brings us to two young boys in Denmark named Kesser and Steen.
It's a fantastic case study in experiential learning and trial and error gardening. So Kesser and Steen were gifted a handful of mystery seeds from a neighbor they call Aunt Green.
Aunt Green, I love
Yeah. And she told them that some seeds were for a remarkably strong chili and others were a mild variety. But they have absolutely no idea which is which.
So everything they are doing here is a test. They don't know if the seeds are even viable. And they are up against a pretty significant geographical hurdle. Because, well, Denmark is not southern Mexico.
Not at all. The source text actually describes Denmark as being as flat as a corn pancake, or a tortilla.
Corn pancake, yeah.
And unlike regions near the equator, Denmark has a notoriously short growing season and a climate that can be highly unpredictable in the spring. You can't just take a tropical capsicum and toss it in the dirt in northern Europe and expect it to thrive.
Right, the variables are entirely different. Even if you get a beautiful spring day where the temperature hits a mild 10 degrees Celsius, the nights are a completely different story.
And that is the lethal variable. If you have a clear night, especially around a full moon with a high-pressure weather system, there is no cloud cover to insulate the ground.
So the heat just escapes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The temperature plummets, and you wake up to morning frost on the grass. For a young nightshade plant that evolved near the equator, frost is an immediate and irreversible death sentence.
So Kesser and Steen know they are pushing their luck by trying to start these plants early in the year. But their motivation is actually very sweet.
It is.
Steen wants to surprise his dad for Easter. Instead of handing him a traditional chocolate egg, he wants to hand him a thriving little chili plant.
Mm.
To do that, they have to cheat the Danish climate.
And their workaround is utilizing Oma's kitchen windowsill.
Oma's windowsill to the rescue.
Always. By starting their seeds indoors, trapped behind the glass in a warm house, they are effectively engineering a microclimate. They buy themselves an extra month of growing time at both ends of the summer.
But because they are treating this whole thing as an experiment, and they don't know if Aunt Green's mystery seeds are dead or alive, they don't want to blow their allowance on expensive, professional, plastic nursery pots.
Right?
So they engineer this totally DIY, no-dig cardboard plug system.
This is where the ingenuity really shines. First, they soak the red and yellow seeds in water to rehydrate them and kickstart the germination process.
Sorry.
Then they raid the recycling bin. They take empty cardboard tubes, just the leftover rolls from kitchen paper towels, and cut them into short little pieces to serve as mini pots.
I geek out over this. It's such a clever hack. They fill these short cardboard tubes with some homemade compost from the backyard, drop the rehydrated seeds in, and line them up on the windowsill.
Yep.
The engineering logic here is that chilies have incredibly fragile root systems when they're young. By using the kitchen roll tubes, the boys won't have to violently rip the plant out of a plastic pot later.
Exactly. When the seedling is strong enough, they can just take the entire cardboard tube and bury it into a larger pot outside. The cardboard will naturally decompose in the soil, and the roots remain completely undisturbed. And they're carefully managing the temperature, too. Chili seeds require consistent bottom heat to sprout properly, ideally sitting somewhere between 25 and 28 degrees Celsius.
That's pretty warm.
It is. But by placing their homemade cardboard plugs right over the radiator heat source on Oma's windowsill, they've created the perfect germination station.
So the trap is set. The seeds are in their paper towel tubes, soaking up the heat on the windowsill, and Kesser and Steen head off to Professor Hendrick's Nature and Innovation class, just hoping biology takes its course while they're at school.
It sounds perfectly idyllic. A great little backyard science experiment teaching patience and resourcefulness.
It really does. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, if you are feeling inspired to try this kind of DIY plug system at home?
Well, this is where things get a bit dark.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is where we have to pause the wholesome fun, because there is a massive caveat to this charming story, and it has to do entirely with the homemade compost the boys scooped out of the backyard to fill those tubes.
This brings us to the hidden danger we alluded to earlier. The nightshade family, which includes these chili peppers alongside tomatoes and potatoes, is incredibly biochemically sensitive to its soil environment.
There is a really frustrating, heartbreaking phenomenon that happens to a lot of well-meaning gardeners every single spring.
Oh yeah, we see it all the time in the forums.
People will go out, buy a brand new bag of potting soil from the hardware store, or dig into their own beautifully aged backyard compost heap. They plant their delicate nightshade seedlings, water them perfectly, and then watch in absolute horror as the plants mysteriously wither away.
Or the plants survive, but their leaves curl up tightly and they produce completely deformed, mutant-looking fruit.
It's devastating. And for a long time, amateur gardeners just assumed they were failing at the basics. They thought they were overwatering or underwatering or not providing enough sunlight.
Right, they blame themselves. But the true culprit is often something entirely out of their control. We are talking about highly persistent synthetic chemicals, specifically a class of hormone-based herbicides.
These are weed killers, chemicals like aminopyralid or 2004-D.
Exactly. These chemicals are synthetic auxins. They are designed to mimic a plant's natural growth hormones. When a susceptible broadleaf plant absorbs them, it triggers uncontrollable, chaotic cell division until the plant essentially grows itself to death.
Yikes.
But here is the catch. Grasses belong to a completely different botanical family. Grasses process these chemicals differently and survive, which is why these specific herbicides are marketed heavily for lawn care.
Of course.
You spray it, the dandelions and clover die horrible deaths, and your turf grass looks perfectly pristine and green.
And that right there is the compost loophole that catches everyone off guard. People use these legally approved, highly effective weed killers on their suburban lawns. A few days later, they mow that lawn.
Yeah?
They take those chemical-laced grass clippings and toss them into their backyard compost heap, thinking they're doing the environmentally friendly, sustainable thing by creating recycled soil.
Or perhaps even worse, municipal yard waste services collect those clippings and truck them off to massive professional composting facilities.
Right. And the logical assumption is that the rigorous composting process, the intense bacterial heat, the decomposition over months or years,
Yeah.
will naturally break those chemicals down into harmless organic matter.
But they don't. These specific hormone-based herbicides are engineered to be incredibly persistent. They do not break down easily, they survive the backyard compost bin, and they routinely survive the massive high-heat professional facilities.
They just sit there, invisible, lurking in the soil. And the moment a sensitive broadleaf plant from the nightshade family, like Kesser and Steen's chili seeds, touches that contaminated compost, the residual ghost of that weed killer attacks it.
Because to the chemical auxin, a chili plant is biologically similar enough to a dandelion that it simply must be destroyed. This raises an important question for anyone attempting to grow their own food, whether on a windowsill or in a raised bed. How much can you actually trust the soil you are using?
It's a scary thought.
It is. Even if you are buying a premium sealed bag from a reputable garden center or using dark, rich compost you made yourself from your own lawn clippings, there is an inherent risk of contamination.
Which brings us to a really crucial, actionable piece of advice from the sources. You should always test your compost or your store-bought soil bags yourself before you risk planting your prized, slow-growing chili seedlings in it.
Always test it.
And the method for doing this is surprisingly low-tech, isn't it?
It is. It's called the bean test. Beans are incredibly fast-growing plants, but more importantly, they are highly sensitive to these exact same synthetic auxins.
Okay, so how does it work?
The advice is to take a small sample of your suspect compost or your new potting soil, put it in a cup, and plant a few cheap, ordinary bean seeds in it.
Okay, within a week or two, those beans are going to sprout, and then you just observe them.
Exactly.
If the new bean leaves look twisted, cupped, or deformed in any strange way, you have your answer. You know your soil is contaminated with persistent herbicides, and you should keep it far away from your vegetable garden.
But if the beans look healthy and normal, your soil is safe to use for your chilies.
It is such a remarkably simple diagnostic step, but it can save you months of wasted effort and frustration. You certainly don't want to end up like those gardeners wondering why their expensive hardware store grow bags have turned into toxic plant graveyards.
No, you really don't.
Let's just hope ant green seeds don't meet a tragic chemical end in those kitchen roll tubes on Oma's windowsill. We will have to trust that Kesser and Steen's compost is clean.
Fingers crossed for them.
So, let's take a breath and look back at the incredible ground we've covered today. We started by untangling the massive linguistic and botanical mess of the word pepper, traveling alongside grueling camel caravans across ancient trade routes to fetch black gold.
All driven by the desperate need to make rotting meat edible.
Right. Then we dove into the complex biochemistry of capsaicin, exploring how it depletes substance P to shut down our pain receptors.
We saw how the fiery defense mechanism of a Mexican plant is being tested in Danish hospitals to reduce our reliance on heavy systemic opioids after invasive knee surgeries.
From there, we joined Kesser and Steen, watching them battle a short growing season and the constant threat of morning frost by hacking Oma's warm windowsill.
And we saw their trial and error genius in creating DIY biodegradable nursery pots out of cut-up paper towel tubes.
And finally, we uncovered the invisible, heartbreaking threat lurking in our backyard compost, the persistent synthetic auxins that can decimate a sensitive nightshade plant.
And why the humble Ben test is your best defense against contaminated soil.
The interconnectivity of all these elements is just wild.
It truly is, and I think there's a fascinating, somewhat provocative thought here for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your week.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
Well, the history and science we've discussed today perfectly illustrate a profound contradiction of the modern natural world. On one hand, we see the absolute, undeniable resilience of nature.
Right.
A tiny, dried-up mystery seed can be rehydrated, shoved into a piece of recycled cardboard trash, and fiercely push its way into the world just from the ambient heat of a kitchen radiator. It desperately wants to live.
Nature always finds a way to push through.
Yet, at the exact same time, we see how shockingly fragile that same resilient organism is. A plant family that has successfully evolved and adapted over thousands of years can be completely, utterly destroyed by the lingering microscopic ghost of a synthetic chemical, and a chemical that humans mass produce and spray into the environment primarily just to keep their suburban grass looking perfectly uniform and weed-free.
That is just crazy to think about.
It really makes you pause and wonder, what other invisible, persistent compounds might we be unknowingly integrating into our local ecosystems, our soil microbiomes, and ultimately our food chains simply in the pursuit of aesthetic convenience?
That is the deeply powerful thought to leave on. The pursuit of the perfect, uniform lawn might just be poisoning the perfect chili pepper. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you walk away looking at your spice rack, your backyard compost heap, and maybe even your empty paper towel rolls a little bit differently today. Keep questioning the world around you, and we will catch you next time. Imagine the intense, fiery sensation